Now, the right time with Bomani Jones on ESPN Radio.
And ESPNradio.com.
I guess you guys have seen the news about Sheldon Richardson. If you haven't seen the news about Sheldon Richardson, I'm going to tell you some news about Sheldon Richardson. And I think that people tend to overreact when athletes get arrested. I really do, because normally the charges athletes get arrested for are, like, not necessarily the biggest of deals. Like, somebody get pulled over for marijuana possession, all of a sudden it's the end of the world. I'm like, look, man, these misdemeanors, calm down. However, Sheldon Richardson, I apologize to Sheldon Williams. Sorry, I haven't had to think about a Sheldon in quite a while. Shannon, have we had a Sheldon in between Sheldon Williams and Sheldon Richardson?
Not that I can think of.
I might make that mistake a lot. Remember, there was another DeAndre that was in the news the same week as DeAndre Jordan, but the other DeAndre, I don't remember what he did, but it was like
Florida
way
State
worse.
Quarterback.
He got into that situation where he hit that woman in the club. DeAndre Jordan is like, dog, like, I understand how easy a mistake that would be to make, but, got my name out here looking bad. Anyway, so Sheldon Richardson, apparently a couple of weeks ago, was arrested. And he was arrested for, I don't need to give you the particulars of the crimes. I can just tell you this. He was drag racing in his Bentley Silver Spur on Interstate 40. We don't know who he was drag racing against, but he was clocked at speeds of 122 miles an hour, 135 miles an hour, and 143 miles an hour. He was also in his car with two other men, a handgun, and a 12-year-old child.
What?
A 12-year-old child. I'd like to know whose child it was, by the way, because, if you're 12 years old, as this is going on, either you are absolutely terrified, like halfway to the point of soiling yourself, or that is the single coolest day you've ever had in your life. Like, we was going 140 in the Bentley down the freeway. Look, 12-year-olds, man, ain't really no telling how it is that they're going to receive a situation like this. That's why grown-ups are supposed to put them in that situation in the first place. So they go at these speeds down the freeway. Sheldon Williams tried to get away from the cops, and the cops came up on behind him after he got off the freeway. He ran through the red light. He tried to turn into a neighborhood, and he tried to dip his Bentley Silver Spur into somebody's driveway because they'll never suspect a thing except he had the brake lights on.
What did he think? He was driving a Honda Accord and it was just going to fit in the neighborhood?
Yeah. Everybody parks their Bentley on the street, right? If you got a Bentley and the Bentley's in the driveway, I need to know what you got in the garage. Because I feel like if you live a life where the Bentley is in the driveway and there's something cleaner in the garage, there's a gate around your neighborhood. Like 5-0 ain't just riding your bumper in that bad boy, if that's what you got. That's just what it seems to be. Now, they got Sheldon Williams. They get into the car, and they then smell marijuana. Now, how many things do you have to be doing at one time to where the smell of marijuana is like this? Absolute. I don't care what your sensibilities are. The marijuana is nothing here at this point. The gun,
loaded.
I got this thing about the guns though. And this is this. People try to take guns and make these very, very narrow spaces where guns are okay and guns are permissible, right? To try to protect the overall notion that having a handgun is something that you should do. Because somebody is out here saying right now about the gun, they're like, how could you have that gun around a 12-year-old? And I'm like, I'm from Texas. I know people who buy guns because they have 12-year-olds. Like, they get married, they have a kid, now you need a gun to protect them. Like, if you think you need a gun to protect yourself, you damn sure better have the gun to protect the 12-year-old, right? So the gun thing will be a thing with people, certainly. I just find it very interesting the ways that people try to get around and find when it is or is not okay to have the gun, and the logic often breaks down. All I see here is 143 miles an hour. Like, before we even get to riding around with the kid, I cannot imagine being in a car going 143 miles an hour. Like, when I look back, I'm 34 years old. So, like, I'm certainly not old, but I'm old enough to know how stupid I used to be. Like, to be fully in line with how stupid I used to be. And I remember once I was making a road trip from New Orleans to Atlanta. We're going to Atlanta, New Orleans, and back. And my buddy was driving my car. He's a little bit older than me, the dentist. Remember I talked about the dentist the other night. How dentists make all the money. He's the dentist, right? So we're riding, and he's just going 100-something miles an hour in the car. And, like, I'm young. I don't want to be the one that's like, hey, this is irresponsible for us to do. So at one point we're rolling, and I'm noticing he keeps looking down at his watch while he's driving. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I made that mile in 35 seconds. Right, because that's just dumb things you do with a car, right? Just drive ridiculously fast for no reason. So I may have told some of you guys about a story where a couple of weeks ago I had the use of a BMW i8 for an afternoon. The joint with the butterfly doors that fly, like the Batmobile. You can go check it out on my Instagram. I got all kinds of pictures of me driving the Batmobile. I'm in the Batmobile singing. I took the Batmobile to the mall. I needed somebody to see me. Anyway, so I got this car. The problem was, I'm like, I can't be out here driving 100-something miles an hour. Like, I think the fastest I got into it was probably like mid-90s or something like that, which is patently ridiculous, but I'm driving a high-performance car. Like, the same thing with Sheldon Richardson to a degree, that car handles in the 90s in a way that your car is a lot less safe at 90 miles an hour than the car that Sheldon Richardson was driving. But 143? Because the thing about driving a car like that is you got a car that can do all that stuff. The rest of us don't. Like, every time I try to get up to speed in the Batmobile, somebody would be ahead of me obeying the law in like a Ford Tempo or something like that. Like, don't you know I got to take this thing back in 2 hours? This dude's driving 143 miles an hour just against somebody, which, by the way, begs the question, who was the other dude? Like, if it was a race and both drivers were clocked at going these speeds, and it sounds like they didn't get the other driver, who was he and what was he driving and who was in his car? I think those are all fair questions to ask, don't you?
You would have to. You would imagine that it had to be somebody who had a high-performance vehicle themselves. Somebody in which Richardson felt threatened enough that he needed to go to 145 or however fast it was.
What car goes 145 miles an hour? I don't think mine does. You know what, though? You raise a funny point there when you do that, and I would get it. I would talk a little bit more about this in the next segment. The telephone number is 888-729-3776. Like, we all find this to be crazy. Like, we all find it to be insane. But we don't treat all unsafe driving the same way, right? So he wasn't drunk. Like, if he's drunk and he's not even speeding, there is one moral reaction to this. You're going to have a hard time selling me on the idea that driving 143 miles an hour sober is safer than driving the limit drunk, right? Like, if we're going to talk about the actual risk, like safety stuff, and this is before we get to blowing through red lights and everything else, this is about as unsafe as anything you could have, right? But it's funny. We talk about how stupid it is when it's this, but if he's drunk, now we get on the high horse, right? Now we get up there because people have a position to moralize. But this is the craziest driving infraction I can think of an athlete having since, what was it, Jason Richardson going 90-something miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone with a baby, right?
Baby, yeah, car seat.
Like, I knew the child was in a car seat. Like, that's crazier than this was. He got suspended for 2 games for that. And I think it kind of went under the radar. 90-something miles an hour in a 40 with a child in a car seat in the back. Like, that's sober. That's just as ridiculous as doing this drunk. Like, whatever your drunk driving sensibilities are, you got to put them on for this, right? Which then begs the next question. What exactly are the Jets going to do?
Bomani.
Man, I got to send an apology out to Sheldon Williams, man. I keep talking about Sheldon Richardson and saying Sheldon Williams over and over again. Like, I turned it into my daddy, where it's the neighborhood play with these names. I call teams by the cities that they used to play in. Like, whatever team moves to L.A., not in my mind. You'll always be the St. Louis Rams to me Even if you used to be the L.A. Rams. Like, no matter who it happens to be, you'll always be that to me. I feel so bad. I ain't thought about Sheldon Williams in 9 years. I said Sheldon Williams about 7 times last segment, talking about Sheldon Richardson.
Sheldon Williams is riding around L.A. right now listening to the show. Like, hold on, wait, hold on. I ain't do nothing.
L.A., why would he be there? His wife plays there. Dude, for all I know, he might be playing for the Lakers now. I don't know who plays for the Lakers anymore. Like, you tell me Sheldon Williams is in L.A. I'm like, what's he doing, playing in the Drew League? Is he in the NBA still, by the way? He's not in the NBA?
Nah, he's not in the NBA, but he's still winning in the game of life, though.
Yes, he is. Yes. But I say, was he on the Pan Am Games team? Did he play for the Pan Am Games team? Anyway, so Sheldon Richardson. I almost feel bad about all these jokes, but whatever. So Sheldon Richardson is really good. Like, that's one thing we have to understand. But Sheldon Richardson is really good. However, Sheldon Richardson is suspended for 4 games for violating the substance abuse policy. Sheldon Williamson came out and made sure to tell everybody that he was not a dope fiend, but apparently he is a dope in that he got caught going 143 on the freeway with a pistol and a 12-year-old in the car. And somebody else. Anyway, so what do you do if you're the Jets? What do you do? Because I don't know if you guys have seen Menace to Society. We couldn't quite find the clip fast enough for you on the YouTubes. But there's that scene where he cuts to it, and Granddad is talking to Kane, and he reads Kane a Bible verse. I can't remember what the Bible verse is. And Kane looks back up and says, what are you saying, Granddad? He looks back and he says, son, you've got to go. And I feel like Sheldon Richardson's got to go. Because apparently the Jets didn't find out about this until we did.
And if you're Richardson, were you going to tell him? Were you going to tell them in advance?
Yeah, like what were you going to say that day you had to go to court? Like, how were you going to get that day off of work? What? I need a personal day, coach. Just a little bit overwhelmed by everything going on around me.
I need a mental health day.
Yeah, like how are you going to play that, right? So if the Jets did not know, and they got Sheldon Richardson out there, and then this happens, like you just find this thing out. And keep in mind, the police say that they smell marijuana in the car, and this dude's got a 4-game suspension coming for what we could presume to be smoking marijuana. Damn, somebody said I just said Sheldon Williamson. Did I say Sheldon Williamson? Sheldon Richardson. Richardson. It's Sheldon Richardson. See, this is why football players hate us, by the way, right? So many football players, they want you to know their face. That's all they want you to do is know their face. I can't even get this dude's name straight. And he's actually good. Like, you do have to understand that if Sheldon Richardson came into my house right now, driving 143 miles an hour, I would have no idea who he was. Yet he does drive 143 miles an hour, and I keep calling him Sheldon Williams. I apologize, Sheldon Richardson. I almost called him Sheldon Williamson. I apologize, Sheldon Richardson. Let me make sure you get all your shine right now. This is your moment. Nobody else's but yours. Your time. But really, if the Jets, you got to think about letting them go, right? Like, you have to have a real conversation. And it's really because I have no idea what this dude is going to do next. Like, there's being irresponsible, there's having poor judgment, and then there's driving 143 miles an hour with a teenager. Not even a teenager, he's 12. Driving 143 miles an hour with a 12-year-old in the car. What is it that you're going to do next? Because this is while you were on suspension. And somehow, and this is the biggest problem here, he didn't think we were going to find out. It's not like they tore up the ticket. Like, okay, the getaway plan. I'm going to dip off the road, and then I'm just going to pull into somebody's driveway. A bit crude, but I could understand how in that moment, especially if y'all been smoking weed, you couldn't come up with a great plan. Like, if that was the best that you could come up with in that moment, I understand the limitations of the situation you were in. Maybe you should have thought up a plan before you went 143 miles an hour, but hey, I'm not judging you for the fact that you had such a cockamamie plan. Like, the brake lights just caught you slipping, right? That's all it is. He just caught you slipping. I understand that part. But if you thought that you could catch a charge and that we wouldn't find out, like, it's amazing that we didn't find out already. Like, how many days has Sheldon Richardson been sitting at the house with that lemon booty, scared to death about what was going to come up? Like, imagine that for a second. You got caught going 143 miles an hour, and you're famous, and it hasn't hit the news yet. Like, every day you turn on your computer, you worry that that's the day.
That's like getting in trouble at school and waiting for the school to call home. Like, you're at the house, and you're sitting by the phone waiting for them to call.
Yes.
Nervous.
He's not even sitting by the phone. He's waiting for somebody else to get the phone. Like, at least if you're sitting by the phone, you got a chance to intercept it. Mama ain't home, and she ain't coming back for no 2, 3, 4 days. My grandmama's staying with me, and she don't hear good. Right? Like, you got a chance there. Like, you've got some sort of option or some way that you can get out of this. So apparently Sheldon Richardson was just sitting around all day, every day, waiting for the other shoe to fall. Oh, no. Dude like that going to get everybody in trouble. They just drafted Leonard Williams. They have Muhammad Wilkerson. I understand what I'm saying sounds crazy because Richardson is honestly just too good for you to just be in this place and be like, we can get rid of a guy like this. However, I would be so scared every day, what in the world is he going to do next? Every single day, that would have to be your concern. Keeping in mind that all it might take for him to slip after this in a way that really matters is messing around and smoking weed. This dude just got through driving 143 miles an hour and tried to hide his Bentley in somebody's driveway. If he is foolish enough to do that, you think he's going to make it to the next drug test?
Bomani.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. You can check him out at the ESPN radio affiliate in Cleveland, Ohio. I'd like to come on with him and his man, Tony Rizzo. Though I said this before he came on, I've never been so sure if our next guest likes me that much. I'm not sure if I like him that much either, but it makes for fun. His name is Aaron Goldhammer. Aaron, what's going on?
Oh, come on, Bomani. You know I love you, and you know it's Riz who does it. So.
I know, but Jimmy, I don't know, man. I think Riz loves me more than he wants to pretend as though he loves me. He always enjoys it when I come on.
We all love you. We all love you. I'm actually now, I don't know if you knew this. I think you were on with us once. I'm doing a new show now in the afternoon with a guy named Emmett Golden, who is one of the biggest Bomani Jones fans in America. He texted me the other night, and he said, man, you have to get on Twitter and see what Bomani and Talib Kweli is saying to each other. So I had to jump on and check that out.
That one was ridiculous, man, but I'm glad to have you on. I won't pick on you about the Cavs losing the finals, at least not until, like, the end of the interview. I think I'll wait till then. That's kind of like the right time. It's all good, man. Ohio State, man, what's going on? Joey Bosa, 3 other players suspended, including 3 wide receivers, including 2 guys who are on the depth chart above Braxton Miller at that H-back position. How you guys feeling on that?
Well, look, I think Ohio State fans are supremely confident no matter who gets suspended. I think coming off of the national championship run, Bomani, the general vibe here is that even though you're going to lose your best player, and Joey Bosa is Ohio State's best player and the prospective number 1 pick in the draft, in my opinion, in 2016, so that is a big loss for the opener, that Urban can just plug in whoever is next on the depth chart, and they're not going to miss a beat. I had fans tweeting and saying to me today that they think, oh, now we'll just win this game by 20. Remember, Ohio State has a revenge factor in this opener against Virginia Tech on Labor Day because Va-Tech came into the Horseshoe last year and laid the beat down on Ohio State that a lot of people thought was going to end their season. So I think the speculation amongst the fans is that it's not going to affect that game very much because Ohio State had so much to play for anyway, and they are so loaded. But I'm not so sure. Virginia Tech is returning 16 starters, too. They're a really good team. It's a tough team to play on the road in a very tough place to play. And Ohio State coming off of this interesting offseason with the quarterback question, and I'm not so supremely confident that they're going to have such an easy time missing these 4 guys in this opening game.
Well, let me ask you this, because you talked about the fans and the confidence level they have. Like, how much, granted there's a national championship, of course, but how much different is that from the Tressel era? Because Ohio State had a long stretch of dominating the Big Ten, but, of course, the one national championship since 1968. Like, how good are people feeling on this Urban Meyer thing?
Well, I think Urban brings a whole nother level of swagger, Bomani, to Ohio State than Tressel did, which is crazy to think because I always thought that Ohio State had some of the most arrogant and obnoxious fans, at least on the fringe, of any team in the entire country, and I'm talking about pro, college, anywhere. But Urban, because it allows Ohio State to have that notch of competing against the SEC, which was always the question with Tressel, it's like reached a whole new level. I don't know if I've ever seen this fan base walking around with as much swagger as they have now. It's almost as if they suspect every other team, including Saban and Alabama and all the other powerhouses, should just kneel at the feet of the Scarlet and Gray. And I think it's going to be tougher for Ohio State this year than a lot of the fans realize. They are supremely talented. They deserve to be the number one team in the country. But they are going to have that mark on their back in every single game they play. And, yeah, they have a pretty easy schedule, but they've got to play Michigan State, which is not going to be a cakewalk. And then there is a game looming at the end of the season against Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. And I think they are going to be so amped up and ready to go, and it's in Ann Arbor this year. So I think there are some landmines for the Buckeyes there, despite the supreme confidence, Bomani, now that the fan base has coming off the national title and with Urban Meyer as their head coach.
All right, talking to Aaron Goldhammer. Check out his show in the afternoons on ESPN Radio in Cleveland. And you and I talked a few months ago about this with Ohio State, where we both thought that JT Barrett was going to wind up being the starter, even though Cardale Jones was the quarterback for the national championship game and for the college football playoff. You still feel that way?
I do, and I feel probably even more confident about that now than I ever have at any point in this process. Here's what's happened, Bomani. Cardale Jones has had a heck of an offseason. He's partied with LeBron. He's been jumping into swimming pools. He's the darling of his hometown. He strolls around Cleveland as one of the biggest sports stars around. I don't know how well that resonates with Urban Meyer. I don't know how Urban really liked Cardale tweeting at Ronda Rousey and the Jenner girls during the ESPYs. I don't know how well that resonated with Urb. Meanwhile, all JT Barrett has done coming off of that horrible injury in the Michigan game last year is work. He went to the Nike 11 camp. He's kept his mouth shut. He's a leader. And he had one of the best seasons at quarterback that Ohio State has ever seen. So even though Cardale led the improbable run through the college football playoff into the Big Ten championship game, I just think JT off the field brings more of what Urban is looking for. That being said, Urban said today at Big Ten Media Day in Chicago that he's not going to announce the starter until you see who jogs out of the tunnel at Virginia Tech on September 7th. So my guess is, after hearing him say that at least early in the season, both quarterbacks are going to play. And remember, Urban won a national title at Florida with Chris Leak and Tim Tebow both playing on the same team and both having an impact. And I wonder if he's concocting some kind of scheme in his office at the Woody Hayes Center to really try to play both quarterbacks all year long and make that work.
All right, last question. Talking to Aaron Goldhammer, the ESPN radio affiliate in Cleveland. Playing Virginia Tech in that Week 1 game. And my buddy Shed is here with me. His wife is a Virginia Tech alum, and we could have told you guys, man, Bud Foster, with all that time to prepare or with anything going on, is something that you really do have to worry about. So JT Barrett will be coming back, but is there a concern at Ohio State of him playing quarterback? The fact that, well, the last time we saw him play, he got hurt.
Well, I think there is, and Herb's offense, as you know, is so susceptible to quarterbacks getting injured. You know, Tim Tebow got hurt at Florida, and it puts the quarterback in a huge line of fire. Beyond that, I have never seen an Ohio State quarterback under fire the way JT Barrett was in that Virginia Tech game last year. I don't think Herb prepared for that game very well. In fact, one of my colleagues at ESPN Cleveland, Bruce Hooley, said this today. I agree. It was one of the worst games Urban Meyer and his staff have ever coached last year in Week 2 when Virginia Tech beat Ohio State. They've got to prepare for that blitz. this year, they ought to know it's coming, and it will come. I think Virginia Tech feels like that is their best chance. So I expect Ezekiel Elliott to have a huge role in that game to try to take some of the pressure off JT and to ease him back in to avoid the possibility of him either A, re-aggravating that injury, or B, putting him in harm's way the way they did in that game last year when Virginia Tech went up to Columbus and won.
All right, Eric Goldhammer. By the way, tell Bruce Hooley I said hi. He likes me every bit as much as Rizzo does. Like every
all your friends
bit.
Here at ESPN.
Yeah, man. I made myself so easy to love, right? But Eric Goldhammer, thanks so much for.
You do, and we love you. We love having you on every night on K&R, man.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Bomani.
1067 The Fan in Washington, D.C. did an interview with a gentleman named Chris Russell. Chris has covered the team for 6 years. And according to a source,
my sources,
yeah, according to a source, Jay Gruden had given up on Robert Griffin as early as last preseason. That 3 days after the first preseason game, he was at his wit's end and wanted nothing to do with Robert Griffin. Right. Okay, let's keep going, though. Let's keep going. It also appears that at some point, Dan Snyder, the owner of the R's, for those of you who are unfamiliar, I'll say Redskins now, but you won't hear me say it again because I think that name is improper, and I just won't do that. So I call them the R's. Snyder, the owner, calls Gruden's agent rather, and tells Gruden's agent that he has been, and I quote, stealing money. That's what the owner called the coach's agent to tell him, that he had been stealing money. Keep in mind, by the way, all of this goes on, and the R's have hired a new general manager. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with this team this year? What could possibly go wrong with a dynamic like the one that they have? I can't wait. How long is it going to be? Hopefully the NFL will give the requisite film necessary for the 30 for 30 on how the football team in Washington basically has ruined Robert Griffin. Now, here's what's happened with Robert Griffin. It's been a very interesting evolution. Robert Griffin came into the league and was a sensation. He was a media darling. But you know a big part of why he was a media darling? He fulfilled one very important role that we had in the landscape at that time. He wasn't Cam Newton. Right? Remember that? Cam Newton starts going bad. Everybody, actually, he only went bad for like a couple of games. Everybody jumps on Cam Newton's back, looks a little bit funny, but hey, we love RG3. We love Robert Griffin. And so Robert Griffin was everybody's guy. I've never seen a turn on anybody as fast as the turn on Robert Griffin. Like, the turn on Robert Griffin was so confusing that people were getting mad at Robert Griffin for stuff that they tell everybody else to do. Like, remember all the people telling Robert Griffin, you need to stop trying to be a pocket passer. They've tried to turn every NFL quarterback there's ever been into a pocket passer. Tried to turn Michael Vick into a pocket passer. And there are good reasons to turn guys into pocket passers. You make more money that way. You stay healthier that way. There's a range of good things that come from being a pocket passer. Robert Griffin had the audacity to say that he wanted to be a pocket passer, and people killed him for it. Killed him for it. Now, what kind of quarterback Griffin should be, it's up for debate. What kind of quarterback Griffin can be after the injuries, up for debate. What I can't figure out is how it is that the owner of this team has been so invested in his quarterback from the very beginning. So invested. Traded so much away for him. The questions always were whether or not Griffin was too close with the owner. Like, that's how invested Dan Snyder has been in Robert Griffin. So how do you wind up in a situation where the first coach runs him into harm's way, and then the next coach was never in on him in the first place? Like, there's no way in the world that Jay Gruden was in on Robert Griffin in the first place and then was done with him by the first preseason game.
If you're Snyder and you're so high on Griffin, don't you think that should have been a prerequisite for the new head coach, that he would be pro Griffin?
Question number one in the job interview. So what's your plan for Robert? Like, everybody talks about how Robert is spoiled and coddled and everything else, He's also the quarterback, and that's just how it works. What's your plan for Robert? That's question number one. We have this highly talented quarterback. Yes, we've had the injury issue, but we have put a lot into him already, and our success hinges on how well he does. So question number one for you is, what is your plan for Robert? How dedicated are you to this plan for Robert? Whether or not you like Robert Griffin or not, that's what it has to be if he's your quarterback and you've traded away so much to get him in the first place. This is what it is. If the other guys on your roster are Kirk Cousins and Colt McCoy, my only question is, what is your plan for Robert? And if your plan for Robert is, I think Robert's a good fit for my offense, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, what is your plan for Robert? Not what your plan is, not what you do all the time. What is your plan for Robert? And that's not what they did, and that just doesn't make any sense given the obvious affection that the owner has for Robert. It just doesn't make any sense that they would go about things the way they have. But there are. So on one hand, you'll have all these people say the problem is that Robert Griffin is too close to the owner. On the other hand, the owner hired a coach without actually keeping his quarterback in mind. Because I'm telling you, for all the shortcomings and the struggles that Robert Griffin has had over the last couple of years, if Robert Griffin hits the market tomorrow, somebody's going to get him. Like, think about this for a second. How much differently would we view Robert Griffin if he wound up with Seattle and Russell Wilson wound up with Washington? Because as far as talent goes, they're in different zip codes. Robert Griffin is just a more talented player than Russell Wilson is. Russell Wilson is really good. That's not saying that Russell Wilson isn't good. Russell Wilson right now clearly has performed better than Robert Griffin did. But in terms of sheer talent, Griffin is that guy. And there's so many things that Griffin can do. It's almost like his first year in the league doesn't even matter. Like, there's so many things that he can do. It appears he's a little bit difficult to get along with. That's certainly there. He seems to be people seem to have a little trouble with that.
What, a quarterback?
But he's your guy.
Not getting along with everybody?
Yeah, but here's what I always thought about Griffin from a distance. Like, Griffin was engaged when he was in college, and then he got married right away when he got out there. They made him the team captain when he first got out there. He's always been in a hurry, like, at the very least to seem grown. Right, to give that impression of having it all together and to give that impression of being grown. And, man, don't nobody want to hear that out of 22. Right? 22 all up in your face, acting like he's in charge and stuff like that. Like, that's too much to ask for 22 to do. Like, if a 22, 23, 24-year-old guy wants to comport himself like that, you got to be like, it can't be like this. But Robert Griffin was not the guy that was trying to hear that. Like, I understand all the reasons that people could possibly dislike him, but he's your guy. Like, that's it. And this is the make or break season for him. Like, who knows what his career is after this if this season doesn't go well. But for Snyder, you had to hire a guy that was all in on Robert Griffin. And if you weren't all in on Robert Griffin, you had to go. And this season is going to go down the tubes for Washington, if for no other reason than they got a head coach who's not all in on Robert Griffin, an owner who seems to be all in on Robert Griffin, and two dudes behind Robert Griffin that all of y'all know damn well cannot, will not, should not start over him. Do you remember when they did that spread in the Washington Post with Kirk Cousins to try to make him into the man? You remember that? Like, everything,
Absolutely.
they want somebody else to be the starter so bad. This is your guy. Like, why won't you just go in on your guy? This is who it is.
Bomani.
You see the poor guy, Wilmer Flores, for the Mets last night. Basically, everybody found out that he was getting traded except for Terry Collins. So he'd gotten himself a standing ovation when he was out there because the fans had found out he's going to be traded. It got all over the social media, people checking the tweets. And now he's out there crying, and the Mets kept sending him out there to play even though he was crying.
The question I have to ask is, did he get the standing ovation before he knew he was being traded? Like, how do you feel if you're Flores and you just walk up there and get a standing ovation for no reason?
What did I do? Like, what has happened, right? Do you look up sheepishly? Yes,
Like, yeah, I acknowledge it. Thank you. Wow, yes, this is a new haircut. Thank you for noticing.
Yes, yeah, but like everybody figured out that he was getting traded except for Terry Collins. And Terry Collins didn't take him out the game. And I thought that Terry Collins after the game was very interesting because Terry Collins was like, yo, man, you wanted me to take him out the game just because he was crying? Because there was a big thing about why won't you pull him out of the game? Why won't you pull him out of the game? We got that, Shannon? Yeah, okay. But, like, why don't you pull him? Why do you pull him out of the game? Because he can still play. That's why. He can still play. Like, I understand it was really unfortunate for him, and I'm not judging him for crying. But if you're not judging him for crying, then why do he need to come out of the game? Like, if he can still get some ground balls, everything will be all right. Right? But I found it very interesting that people really thought that simply because he was crying, he should have come out of the game. Like, I guess it was the idea that, like, suffering the indignity of the public seeing you crying or whatever it is, but he was hurting. But, hey, man, the Mets are trying to make the playoffs, and their roster has 25 people. We're not taking it down to 24 just because he's in a bad mood. Oh. I tell you this, though. I'm kind of glad for that Terry Collins didn't really notice the crying, right? Or, like, didn't really care. Because can you imagine that he got traded, he thinks he gets traded, and Terry Collins comes over? Terry Collins doesn't strike me as the sort of dude who's asking questions in those situations. Right? Like, I imagine Terry Collins just walking up to him, tapping him on the shoulder, and being like, it's a man's game. And then walking away.
Telling him to man up.
Yeah, but you know what, though? I mean, like, the phrasing is not delicate, but that's kind of what it is, right? Look, he didn't find out that his mom died. He found out he got traded, or he thought he was getting traded. Like, that's what it was. That's it. I understand that's a lot. It's going through your mind and everything else. But you better get up here and swing this bat.
Who knows? Maybe he had a lot of things on his mind. Maybe he just, I don't know, redecorated his new condo. I don't know.
Yeah, and he didn't get traded. That's the other part. Like, I do have questions about the Mets telephone tree. Like, how do these things work where the last person to find out what's going on here is the manager? Like, at the very least, because it was pending physical, and Carlos Gomez did not pass the physical according to what the Mets needed, right? But you can't have a situation where literally everybody in the world knows what's going on except for the manager. Because I think they did put Terry Collins in a bad place. I do. And I do agree with him when he says, if all you're telling me is that he's crying, then he's going back out there to play. That's it. Like, that's what it is. It was a very sympathetic reception to his tears, by the way. We have moved to a new place in things where people cry in public like that and we give them our pity. And I'm not saying that he wasn't, like, worthy of our pity in that situation. I'm just saying that the reaction to him crying on the field seems to be an indicator as to how it is that you guys seem to be raising the softest generation of kids, like, that the world has ever seen. Like, sometimes it ain't going to be pleasant. It's not. Sometimes it's not going to be pleasant. And I ache for Wilmer Flores just like the rest of y'all ache for Wilmer Flores. But you do understand. Wasn't no coming out the game. Wasn't going to be none of that. You watch football, people throw up blood and then go out there and play football. I'm supposed to take him out the game because he feels bad? That's not how it works. Like, honestly, you calling into work. Hey, man, I'm a little sad. I don't think I'll be able to make it today. And I'm not judging anybody for feeling sad. I'm just saying that's not going to get you out of going to work. That's it. We all feel a range of human emotions. We all emote. No judgment for Wilmer Flores. And you know why I'm not judging Wilmer Flores? Because he went out there and played. That's why I'm not judging him. Otherwise, I'd be saying something about millennials, and I don't have any idea how old that guy is. For all I know, he's 35 years old.
Bomani.
By the way, you guys noticed yesterday, they kept asking Bill Belichick questions about Tom Brady. And let me paraphrase what Bill Belichick said. Like, I could give you an exact quote, but why do that when I could say it much more succinctly? Bill Belichick basically said, my name's Bennett. I have another brief synopsis of what Bill Belichick said. My name's Paul. His name is Bennett, and he ain't in it. His name is Paul, and that's between y'all. Bill Belichick has died here, and he says that Bob Kraft sent a memo out and said that nobody should talk about it. They don't want anybody to talk about it. Bob Kraft is going to be angry for everybody. And I think that saves Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick's like, whew, glad you said that, because I got nothing for him. Bill Belichick doesn't, let me tell you, Bill Belichick is not the guy who's going down on a sinking ship. Because Tom Brady right now, he's dropping like a brick. I don't think Bill Belichick sees any reason why he should take precious time away from game planning, trying to keep his head above water, going down with Tom Brady's sinking ship. Now, I did TV yesterday with my buddy Dan Levitar. We do a show every day called Highly Questionable that you can catch 4:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Not ESPN2, but ESPN, because we moved on up to the east side. Anyway, Dan was saying that if he was Tom Brady, that his feelings would be hurt by the way that Bill Belichick has handled the situation, and it would affect their relationship. And my response to that was, which one of those two guys do you think is going to be around New England the longest? Because I think it's Bill Belichick. Tom Brady will go. Bill Belichick will still be there. All right? Bill Belichick is not, like, going past his physical coaching prime in the way that Tom Brady is. I think Tom Brady got a year, maybe two, and then it's probably a wrap, okay? If Tom Brady wants to stick around, Tom Brady needs to be making nice with Bill Belichick, because I don't think Bill Belichick can think twice. Imagine that. Imagine Tom Brady giving Bill Belichick some back talk.
You know, right now we're in a long step-by-step process as we head into the beginning of the 2015 season. So we're just going to take it one day at a time. So we've got some preparation work to do in terms of conditioning and going through some policies and things like that, trying to get everybody on the same page like we normally do. We'll try to have a good day today and then try to have another one tomorrow and just string them along day by day.
You think Tom Brady? Who's that? I heard what's a Tom Brady? Serious question for you. This is a real question. Because you have to understand this. Bill Belichick is not a fool, right? Like, I don't think there will ever be a situation where Bill Belichick ever goes on any, like, full-on offensive against Tom Brady in any way. And you know why I say that? The Bernie Kosar situation in Cleveland. Like, Belichick's been down this road where you run out the quarterback and you see what happens. That's how mad people – remember how mad people were in Cleveland about – that was Bernie Kosar. We're talking about Tom Brady. That was Bernie Kosar. All right? So Tom Brady, like, I don't think Belichick will be the guy, like, pushing Tom Brady out the door per se, unless it just absolutely comes down to that. But I guarantee you this, Bill Belichick has got to be wishing that he could give Jimmy Garoppolo every snap right now, right?
I was watching some of the training camp this morning. It was open to the public, and Garoppolo and Brady were alternating reps.
There's no reason for Tom Brady to be taking these snaps. Like, when's Tom Brady going to play? There's no reason for him to be taking these snaps. So what argument are you going to make? We're going to send Tom Brady through training camp to get him ready to go sit down for 4 weeks, at which point he'll need to get himself back into shape, right? Like, what is the point? You're not going to ever be able to convince me that if Belichick didn't have his way, they would be full on with Jimmy Garoppolo. And if they were 4-0 with Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom, take your time and rest your aching bones. We got this over here. We're just going to keep this thing rolling. Because it doesn't make any sense right now for the Patriots to really waste any time with Tom Brady playing quarterback. Like, maybe you bring him back in week 5. I guess at some point he does need to get acclimated. But Tom Brady need to be out here with these number 2s. Like, I think that is a fair question to ask. Whatever familiarity that Brady and the receivers are able to develop during training camp, how much of that's going to matter after he's been on the ice for 4 weeks? I mean, I'm asking that. I don't mean that rhetorically, because my thinking would be that stuff kind of reverts back and those dudes get used to Jimmy Garoppolo. And the reality is those dudes need to get used to Jimmy Garoppolo. They need to. Like, I don't think it would be fair to ask Jimmy Garoppolo to spend even 50% of the preseason working with the number 2s and then trying to get it up to speed working with the number 1s. No, you got to go in there with this 4-0. Like, this is what it's about to be. We need to come out of this. Because, hey, Buffalo's not bad. Some kid at Harvard said he's got the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. I mean, that's preposterous. But, I mean, they're not bad. Like, falling behind isn't really an option. Like, going 2-2 to start the year this year might not be the same thing as it was going 2-2 last year to start the season. It would make a lot more sense to just be like, yo, Jimmy's our quarterback until further notice, because that's what the reality is.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
All guests join us on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, including our next guest. She covers the New York Jets for Newsday, and that sounds like the most entertaining job in the world because there's always something going on. Her name is Kimberly Martin. Kimberly, what's going on?
What's up? How are you?
I am doing just fine. If it isn't one thing with your team, it's another, isn't it?
I just can't believe it is day one of training camp, and this is the type of story we're writing. But it's the NFL. You never know what's going to happen,
So we have this right. Sheldon Richardson, who is already set to serve a 4-game suspension for substance abuse, driving 143 miles an hour on the freeway and got arrested with a 12-year-old child in the car and a smell of marijuana there. How are the Jets reacting to this?
I don't know. The scary thing is the Jets had no idea about this arrest that happened 2 weeks ago until they saw the media reports and saw us tweeting about it. And we were calling, trying to figure out what is going on. And that's what's interesting about this whole thing, because the team didn't know, and their head coach, Todd Bowles, is very big on accountability. This is his first year as a head coach. He's come in as the anti-Rex. He's big on guys doing their job. And if it's true that the Jets had no idea this happened 2 weeks ago on the heels of Sheldon being suspended 4 games, like you mentioned, the whole situation is just so bizarre, because you want to know how are they going to discipline him? Are they going to discipline him going forward?
Well, let's be clear. He's blustery. He makes a lot of noise, but Sheldon Richardson is also really good, correct?
Yes. And I had a conversation with somebody earlier today before any of this happened, and I said, Sheldon seems like a really good kid. He just makes dumb mistakes, and he's really immature at times. But this whole situation that happened in Missouri with the driving 143 miles an hour, speeding away from the cops, going through a traffic light, and then he had the nerve to turn off his lights and pull into somebody's driveway to make it seem like, oh, okay, the cops don't catch me now. With a kid in the car, loaded gun, it's just marijuana. It's just all too much. You can't ignore it. It's becoming a pattern of behavior with him.
It's not very good when you commit a crime and when people describe it and it just naturally comes out, and then he had the nerve to. Like, that's a sign something's gone wrong here.
It's because if the report had just been Sheldon, was pulled over for going 143 miles an hour, that's a crazy. Who drives that fast? But okay, that's crazy in itself. But to have that with the child in the car, 12-year-old with the gun, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking. And this all comes out after we had spoken to him, and he said, I'm not a dope fiend. I quote, I failed every drug test and this drug test, so there's no reason to appeal the suspension, but I guarantee this won't happen again because I'm not a dope fiend. For this news to come out after he says those words, you wonder if he actually has learned from some of the mistakes that he's made. Is he mature enough to handle the money, to handle being a leader on this team, to handle the NFL in general? You don't know at this point.
All right, Dr. Kim Martin in Newsday, and you said the question was there whether or not the Jets would discipline him. Is there any chance that they might be done with him after something like this?
I think you'd have to say there's a chance, and only because he's already suspended. Him failing the NFL drug test, it's almost like these guys know when testing is. When that came out, it was sort of like, how can he be so stupid? So he gets suspended 4 games. So that's a big hit in itself. But now to have this situation, if you're Todd Bowles, if you're a new head coach coming into the New York market, you're telling these guys, you're preaching accountability, you want them to focus solely on football. It's gonna look crazy if Sheldon is still on the team. He hasn't faced any other disciplinary actions from the league or the Jets after the situation. Other guys on the team might be like, well, you can't tell me anything. Look, this kid's driving around 143 miles an hour with a gun and the marijuana and all this. So I don't know how you set the standard for accountability and you have this kid doing these sort of things.
Well, how's it gone for Todd Bowles so far instituting his program?
Well, it seemed like it was going okay. The guys love him in the locker room. They are like, he is a player's coach the same way as Rex. But as a media member covering him, there's none of the hyperbole. He's not a big talker. Todd Bowles does not like hearing himself talk on camera. Rex never met a camera he didn't like. Todd is not like that. But they both are good head coaches. Well, I should say good football coaches. We'll see how good Todd Bowles is as a head coach. But this sort of situation, you thought, new head coach, new regime, new general manager, okay, different Jets. And now we need to see how Todd Bowles is going to kind of rein everything in and get control of the guys.
All right, Dr. Kim Martin of Newsday, how's the quarterback thing going down that way? Have they found one? Do they think they have one?
It's day one, so we have no idea, how it's going to shake out week one. It's too much time. there's too much time in between that. But right now, Geno Smith is the presumptive starter. He's the incumbent. It's his job, but it won't be his job for long if he messes up. And Todd Bowles has said that. I don't know. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's a veteran. He's a smart guy, Harvard educated, was in Chan-Gailey's system, in Buffalo years ago. So if Geno falters during the regular season, don't be surprised if you see, Ryan Fitzpatrick getting tapped on the shoulder like, okay, you're up.
Well, how do Geno's teammates feel about him as a quarterback? Because when he's good, he can be very good, but when he's bad, he's the worst quarterback I've ever seen.
Yes. I think it's hard for the players because if this is your quarterback, you have some of the guys have said we have no choice but to trust him. And they didn't mean it as a slight, but that's the reality of the situation. They drafted him in the second round. When Sanchez got hurt 2 years ago, they put Geno in. He's been the starter ever since. Now it's time for Geno to take that next step. And if you are on this team, you have to believe that Geno can do it, because the alternative is, that's a scary situation where you're like, oh, I don't have confidence in this guy. No, you have to build him up. You have to, like Revis said yesterday, we have to have his back. And it's true because he's the guy for right now.
All right, last question for Kim Martin in Newsday, talking about the Jets. We mentioned Sheldon Williams earlier, but they drafted a gentleman who plays a very similar type of game to him in Leonard Williams in the first round. How impressed have the Jets been with him so far?
They like him. It's still early, but, guys are saying today, he made some mistakes, but it's day one. And I think heading into the draft, Leonard Williams people were talking about him as arguably the best player overall in the draft. So for the Jets to get him at 6 overall, that was a steal. That was the move they had to make, even with Muhammad Wilkerson on the roster and Sheldon Richardson. So right now, Leonard looks good, but it's still early. Guys are still getting acclimated. Leonard is now working with the first team defense because of Sheldon's situation. Sheldon's working with the second team. So now we have to see how Leonard is going to adjust to working with those guys. And by the end of training camp, we'll have a much better idea of how good this D-line can be.
Y'all hear that? It's not just me. She almost called him Sheldon Williams too. Everybody needs to know that. I've been messing that up all night long. You worked there, and you almost did it too. I feel a whole lot better.
It's been a long first day, Bo. It's been a long first day.
Look, it hadn't even been a long day for me. I called him Sheldon Williamson earlier. Poor Sheldon Williams is just getting dragged into this, and he didn't do a thing to deserve it. Kim Martin of Newsday covered the New York Jets. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's do it again.
All right, take care, hon.
Bomani.
Man, look, apparently I said Sheldon Williams again last segment, too. If Sheldon Williams is listening, man, I really do apologize for this. I think that if you're Sheldon Williams, and I keep meaning to say Sheldon Richardson, and I keep saying Sheldon Williams, you need to feel like you so memorable that no other Sheldon can replace you. That would be the positive spin that I would put on that, as opposed to me continuing to put you in the same sentence with a gentleman who was driving 143 miles an hour smelling like dank with a child in the car. 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. I want to change gears a little bit, and I'm kind of doing, to a degree, in this segment that's about to come up, to an extent, I'm doing what I'm criticizing, and this is kind of I recognize that. I want to say that going into it. And what I mean by that is I'm going to talk about what I'm talking about at the bottom of this hour. I'm not bringing it off the top, but I'm going to criticize at the same time what we deem to be important in this media game. So you can easily make the argument against me on the other side that I'm going to say what's coming up is so important, but I'm talking about it at the very end of this show. I didn't talk about it at 9 o'clock, right? So to a degree, I recognize my guilt and my complicity in the situation that I'm going to describe. But the name Tim Beckman ring a bell to any of you guys. Some of you who have listened to this show will remember me. I've talked about Tim Beckman a couple of times. He is the head football coach at the University of Illinois. There have been allegations of abuse surrounding Tim Beckman's program. There have been players who have there's been a player who's alleged that he was rushed back to injury and they felt like he had to quit football to preserve his health. There's players who talk about being strong-armed into offices and being asked just to sign the letter to give up their scholarship, give up your scholarship, give up your scholarship. CNN did a pretty thorough report on the claims made by players about Tim Beckman. And so Big Ten Media Day was this week, and today Tim Beckman faced the media at Big Ten Media Day, and here is what he said when asked about the abusive treatment. I've been around some great individuals throughout my career, from high school coaches on up to the college coaches that I've been able to play for and work for. You know, we're focused right now on a 2015 football team. We took off from last year after a great end of the year, and we've been focused since January on becoming a better football program. The philosophy that we continue to use is what these players believe in football. Hey, man, if you didn't do what these players are saying you did, like, how are you not loudly proclaiming that you did not do it? Like, how does that not happen? Here's what he said. He considers himself to be a father figure to his players. He says, we're fathers. I think that each one of our coaches would say the same thing. We're in the process of providing avenues for our football players to become better men, become better football players. We want the best. We want a relationship for a lifetime as we talk to them. We want to be able to communicate with one another throughout their lives. So as a football coach and as being the part of a football program, I think those are very essential parts of leading young men. And that is a fantastic collection of cliches of all the good things that football can be. But there's a line of people that are accusing you of being everything that's wrong with football. How is this all you've got? And you know how that's all he's got? That's all he's got because that's all he has to have. Like, it's not as though, I mean, for what I can tell, it's not as though he wound up hounded by questions, right? Like, this is a time where, as a media corps, I would think that that's when you ask somebody question after question after question. You drive them to cuss you out, basically, based on what these allegations are. Because let me tell you something. If somebody found out that players at Illinois were driving cars that it looked like they didn't pay for, and that was the story, the questions would be there. And the questions would be flying. How can somebody have the allegations hanging over him that hang over Tim Beckman, and it's almost like we're afraid to bring it up, like we barely discuss it? Now, I know that part of that is the fact that Illinois is not very good. So since they're not very good, we don't have great reason to talk about them. Like, nobody cares about Illinois football. So I get that as a result of people not caring about Illinois football, they don't really care about the transgressions of the Illinois football program. Like, if these allegations I'm talking about were about the football program at the University of Montana, I can't promise you that I'd be on the radio talking about it. Like, I recognize that. Like, I get that there's a sliding scale in terms of the relevance of the program. Like, how much you care about the program is going to determine in large part how much you care about the things surrounding it. That came up during the North Carolina football scandal. Well, no, the football team was caught up in the academic stuff. Now, it got into basketball later, but when it first happened, people were like, why is this not a bigger story? And like, because people just don't care about North Carolina football. Like, that's how we wound up getting there. So I understand that part of that, where part of that comes from. But the Illinois athletic department as a whole is under some pretty significant allegations. Like, when you start talking about the things that have happened with the women's basketball program and the things that are alleged there, look, I think I've said this on the show before, but my parents met at the University of Illinois. Like, that's where they met. That's where they, did their courtship thing and everything else. Like, that's where they met in the 1960s. And they were part of the activist community there at the time. And one thing that they were activists toward was about the treatment of black players at the University of Illinois. And so it's crazy for me to think that they were there literally 50 years ago. And some of the things that they were talking about and fighting against 50 years ago, those are the sorts of things that are alleged to have gone on with the Illinois women's basketball program. Like, we're talking about, like, that kind of stuff, and it's going on right now, and it, like, barely comes up. And so if we're going to be honest about Illinois football, Tim Beckman will have to stand before more cameras, probably at Big Ten Media Day, than any other day in the football season. Like, they might be halfway decent or whatever, but how good Illinois going to have to be for you to give a damn about what Illinois is doing? Illinois has made the Rose Bowl in the last 15 years. You didn't give a damn about that, right? So, like, what would Illinois have to do to make themselves important enough where allegations of abuse and coaches beating players up would be enough to register? Like, what would it have to be? Because, again, I feel pretty confident saying that if these dudes were spinning around driving nice cars, or you heard that they were on a payroll getting $300 a month, somebody would be somewhere talking about it. Somebody would be on some high horse with something to say. Or at the very least, there would be people on the opposite side talking about how unfair it is that these guys get busted for $300 a month. Like, we would be talking about that. Somehow, everything else that happens in football is just kind of all is fair in love and war. Like, I joked earlier about us raising the softest generation of kids or whatever. Like, I'm joking in large part. I don't have kids, so I don't understand y'all's struggles. However, I've never been one who believed that the way that we condone treating athletes is an appropriate thing. Like, the only workplace where we would think it was appropriate to talk to people like coaches get the license to talk to athletes, even the way they get to talk to each other. That's the only world where that's like none of us would want a boss to have a scream at us like coaches scream at players. And the idea is, well, you got to get the best out of them, right? Like, your boss doesn't need to get the best out of you. Like, according to that theory, anybody could get screamed at if all you're trying to do is get the best out of them, right? You can do that to anybody. But I do think that in large part we got this thing with practices and everything else where we're like, hey, that's just what they do over there. And I don't always know where the line is supposed to be, because I do understand that in that world they do things differently. Like, there's a bit of cultural relativity at play, and I can't expect a football field to be like my office. Like, I can't expect the things I'd go to HR for to be the same that you would be the same as what you do that for in football. But if people are alleging abuse, and CNN is doing long reports on the allegations of abuse, I think that man would have had to say a little bit more about it at media day. For whatever reason, he didn't.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern, or on demand at ESPNradio.com.